Welcome to the Leapfrog BI Sample Project video series. My name is Paul Felix, and in this video we're going to be discussing the dimension component. Dimension components are exactly what the name implies. They're a component that creates dimension tables. They can be sourced from transform components or PSA components, and they are used by fact components. So the fact component will reference the dimension component, and that's what's going to get our foreign keys into our fact table. So let's switch over to our sample project and build one. Okay, to get started here, I'm already signed into our sample project. We can see that here in the top right. I'm going to move directly over to the component area. I know I'm in the correct project because it actually says sample project here. Probably not the best naming. I actually named my account the same as my project. In any case, I know that I am in the right project here. I'm going to move straight over to the transform component that we created in the previous video just to get a quick refresher on where we left off. So this transform component is set up to retrieve data from a PSA component, the PSA product, and it's only going to retrieve records that are newer than the records that were retrieved on the previous run. So this is a transform component that's going to ensure that we can incrementally load our dimension. And of course, we have a set of fields here. We may or may not use all those fields in our dimension, and we have a couple of expressions. These expressions are what actually is used in our filter, and the filter is what carries out the behavior of incrementally loading or selecting a subset of the PSA records. So let's move back over to our component area, go over to the dimension type component, and create a new dimension. Now there are only two dimension templates at the time of this recording. You have your dimension main, which, as I've already pointed out, it is a component that actually creates dimension tables sourced from PSA or transformations. You also have your template for an existing dimension, and this is a very important template. It can be used if you, say, have several marks that use the same dimension. You don't want to have to replicate that dimension over and over, and instead of doing something like that, you can just profile that dimension and use it as an existing dimension. In this case, we're going to create a new dimension, so I'm going to go over to my or select the appropriate template here. I'll call this my product dimension. And for the source, we can see that I can select either a transform or a PSA component. I'm going to select the transform. And for the connection, I'm going to select my mark connection. I set this mark connection up the same way as we have set up all the other connections in previous videos. So I'm going to save that. And as soon as I do so, I have my dimension ready to be defined. I'm going to go over to the component detail to define all the details of this dimension. So starting at the top, we have a couple of new sections here that are only appropriate for dimension type templates. And at the very top, we have the key field dimension definition. So I'm going to go into this modify key field area and quickly explain what this is. What behavior this is controlling. The key to the dimension is what is going to uniquely identify a dimension record. In this case, it is product ID. Now, product ID is a business key. It has been moved forward through the entire lineage of this video series, and I just want to be clear that we're not using product ID as whenever we try to load our fact table in subsequent videos. We're only using product ID here to identify a unique record. And it's important, of course, to identify a unique record so that whenever we try to do subsequent loads, we know whether to actually insert a new record, or if we need to look at the difference between the existing record and the new record to track history as is defined in our slow change dimension definition. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to go back now and let's actually look at our slow change dimension definition. Go to modify dimension here, And this is, again, pretty straightforward. There are 3 different buckets that I can place every attribute in this table or in this dimension. That's the SCD type 0, 1, and 2. 0 meaning that any attribute that's placed in this bucket is never going to be updated. After the initial load, it will never be updated again. SCD1, these attributes will be updated if a new value is loaded into the dimension. The old value will be discarded. It'll simply update the value of these attributes and discard any earlier value. Meaning, for example, if color one day is red and the next day a new or the same record based on the dimension key is tried to be loaded again, and that new record has a color of maroon, then red will be overwritten. It will be updated to now say maroon. SCD2 is going to, of course, track history. So in the example I just gave, we would keep both the red and the maroon record. The red record would be expired. It would be marked as expired, and the maroon record would become the current record. So I can just simply take these different attributes, place them in the bucket that I'm interested in, or that is appropriate for the type of tracking that I would like to achieve. Let's take color, for example, and move it over to 2. I'm going to move size over to 0. Probably not going to be appropriate, but just to show that you can place these in any area that you want, any type of SCD. And I'm done. Now I have my history tracking defined. I can keep going through here and do nearly all of the things that I could do in that transform main that we created before this or that we based this dimension on, such as I can create a join. Maybe I want to join this to another component to bring in fields from another component. Like I could do a left join here, and I might also not only want to use the transform, but I might also want to use a PSA. More than likely not, but if I did have several, or not in this case, but in many cases I will have data in several tables that I want to be able to join together and get into my dimension. So it's as simple as making those selections. I do have to create an expression that defines my on clause, and that's just an expression with a Boolean data type or a compare type expression. I'm not going to create one now, so I'll just leave that as is. I can still create a filter here if for some reason I wanted to filter my source records. Remember in the transform, prior to this, all we really did was filter out the PSA component to only include new records. Well, I could have just as easily have carried out that operation here directly in my dimension by defining a filter. And then, of course, I have all of my fields. Well, I have expressions as well. I'm not going to define any now, but I also have all of my fields. And most of these fields I probably want to keep, but there's also a set of them that I may not be interested in keeping in my dimension. I do want to point out that it is mandatory that you have all of your keys, such as product ID. You can't have a key of a dimension without actually having that in your field. So if I'm going to use product ID as a key, I've got to leave that in my field, which should make pretty good sense because I have to have that field available for future loads to compare new records to. So that's really it. I've just defined a dimension. When I deploy this, it will create the dimension. It'll load it every time I rerun this process. And I'm ready to move on to the next component, which is going to be a fact component. So I'll see you in that next video.